Hi, welcome to this how-to video. We're going to go through how to set up your bin, how to acquire your worms, and how to choose the right location for your worms to be happy and successful. So let's start with preparing your bin. I've got kind of a smaller storage bin. I would actually recommend a bigger one, like a 5-gallon one, but just for the purpose of this video, I got a smaller one. So now we're going to start filling up the bin. You want to shred some newspaper and soak it in some water and then wring out that water so that it's damp but not wet. You don't want it being wet because you don't want mold or fungus growing inside your bin. And you want to fill up your bin at least about halfway with that shredded damp newspaper. The next thing you want to add in your worm bin is go ahead and go outside and find some good topsoil. You don't need much, but just a little bit of this soil can help to start nice beneficial bacteria for the soil in your worm bin. And then you want to go ahead and add a little bit of food scraps. I have some chopped up asparagus tips that I'm dropping in here, but really any chopped vegetable will do. There are some certain foods you want to avoid adding to your worm bin, and we'll talk about those in another video. So go ahead and mix everything up once you've got those three materials. And one thing to think about is you want your worm bin to sit like this for at least a couple days because worms really don't like a clean, sterile environment. So worms actually breathe through their skin. So one thing that you really want to ensure that is even though that they're in a storage bin, you want to make sure that there's good enough airflow. So go ahead and drill a good amount of holes into your bin. Of course, you don't want these to be too big because you don't want worms to escape. One last touch I always like to add to my worm bin is this info sheet. I put it on top so it always reminds me what I can and can't add to the worm bin. All right, the next thing you got to do is find your worms. I would recommend finding a local worm farmer. So I actually have mine in this bag right now. I actually found these on Craigslist. If you go on Craigslist and look up worms, I bet somebody in your local area is selling them. Just kind of use your usual good judgment in terms of safety in Craigslist. You also can buy worms online. I've bought from Uncle Jim's Worm Farm before. You can find them on Amazon as well. I can leave a link in the description for that. I would recommend buying locally for a couple reasons. It's going to be cheaper and then you're supporting local businesses, right? For example, I bought these worms. I got 200 worms for, I think it was $16, which is a lot cheaper than what you would find anywhere online. All right, now it's the fun part. You're going to take your worms and you're basically just going to dump them onto the top of your bin. You don't have to worry about dumping them onto the bottom or mixing them into your bin. They're worms. They're going to dig. They're going to do their thing. If your worms look lazier than mine, it's quite possible you had them shipped online. My guys, like I said, I bought them from a local worm farmer. They did not have to travel in a box for days, so they are pretty much still ready to go. But I wouldn't stress too much if your worms look a little lackadaisical. They can just take a little bit of time to acclimate, so it's nothing to worry about. But yeah, you're just going to dump them in and enjoy watching them crawl around for a little bit. All right, once you've had your fill of watching them crawl around, you're going to put the lid on, make sure it's tight. In the first week or two, that's going to be the #1 time when worms are going to try to escape. All right, so you got your worm tub all set up. Now you have to think about where you want to put it. And the best thing to remember is that worms like to live in the same type of environment that you do. So we're talking 60s and 70s, not so much 80s, definitely not 50s, 40s, and 30s. Consequences of putting your worms in a bad location could be your worms kind of stagnate and stop producing as much. And also your worms ultimately are going to die, right? If they overheat or get too cold. A garage like this one might be a good place, but you have to think seasonally you might have to bring your worms inside if you live in a place that it gets extra hot or extra cold. If you're investing all this time and a little bit of money into a worm bin, you want to keep these guys healthy and happy. With all that being said, the best place to put your worms is inside, and that might be a little scary, but as long as your worm tub has a tight lid and you're kind of conscious about not overfeeding your worms, you shouldn't have issues with pests or smell. But I understand that's kind of a scary thing to do, so maybe starting out in a garage, and once you feel comfortable with your setup, you can transition it inside might be a good idea for a lot of people. All right, I hope this video was really helpful. Just some things to think about. A pound of red wigglers can compost a pound of food in a day. So once you really get this thing going, you can be really productive in producing compost for your garden and also just having a really sustainable way of getting rid of your food scraps. Red wigglers double in population about every month, so I started this bin with 200. In a couple months, I'm definitely gonna have to move them to a bigger bin because I should have a much higher population. I hope that overall this video was pretty informative, and I wish you guys all the best. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment or check out some of the other great content made on YouTube about vermicomposting.